We thought we were having a hell of a hailstorm when we woke up in the middle of the night, to a peal of thunder and the sound of our cabin being pelted. It went on for about a minute. Then it stopped. There wasn't any rain, which was strange. We went back to sleep. Faintly aware of the smell of something burning, I figured it was probably from a lightning strike somewhere else. In the morning, we realized how wrong we'd been. Jill was the first to get up, but her yelling ensured that I was right on her heels. Our property was a wreck. Baseball-sized burns covered the lawn as far as we could see, and when I went outside to assess the damage to our cabin, I was dismayed to find similar, albeit smaller, burns all over the roof. "Had to have been meteorites," Jill claimed. "I bet that thunder we heard was a big one breaking up." I didn't know enough to disagree, but I thought it was pretty weird. She concurred. We spent the day doing our best to rake up the marble-sized pieces of rock, which was hauled out and piled in the back of the property by the compost heap. Jill thought they might be worth something to someone, so we were going to bring a jar full back home at the end of the summer. As she talked, I could tell she was uncomfortable. The work we'd been doing had aggravated the chapped skin around her mouth and under her arms. Something about the time of year always did that to her, and no matter how much she tried to keep the areas moist, they would still crack painfully. I told her I'd finish up for the night if she wanted to go inside. She did. I made a vague plan to excise the ruined bits of lawn and reseed it, but I soon got frustrated. It was going to be a major project that would take days, if not weeks. There were still whole areas of the yard where we hadn't picked up the meteorites. They'd wrecked the lawnmower if I tried to go over them just to make the area presentable. In the meantime, it was such a pain in the ass. The next day, to make matters worse, we noticed that the well water had acquired a taste. It was briny, flat, almost coppery. Wholly unpleasant. You could drink bottled water for the rest of the vacation, which we'd been doing most of the time. But we still showered and brushed our teeth with the stuff that came out of the well. And for a while, we kept doing it. On the bright side, my gums had stopped bleeding when I flossed. Must have been all the extra minerals from the well water that gets filtered out in municipal reservoirs. After another long day of yard work, I was preparing dinner when I heard Jill shriek from the bathroom. And she'd gone in to take a shower a few minutes earlier, and I rushed to see what was wrong. She was coughing and swearing and working to wipe away clear, viscous something that had pooled on her face. I could see the shower head oozing the same stuff, clogging the drain, puddling like syrup on the bottom of the bathtub. If she hadn't leapt out the second she felt it on her face, she would have been covered from head to toe. I helped Jill towel off as much of the stuff as I could, and a minute or two later, the shower head had started spitting out water again. It took a bit of coaxing, but she eventually held her head under its flow so she could wash her hair and get rid of the residue of whatever the hell had gotten on her. Once Jill was clean, as she was going to get, I called the guy in charge of well maintenance for the county. The only guy in charge of well maintenance for the county. He answered right away, but gave the reply that I knew was coming. It'd be at least 3 weeks before he could get out here and take a look. I pleaded with him to make some time to come earlier, and offered him way too much money. But the best he could do was move the appointment ahead by 2 days. He told me that he'd seen algae blooms in a few of the local wells. The only suggestion he had was to run the water until it looked normal, which is what we've been doing for our subsequent showers. I hated having to wait. It was good to know that he'd seen something like this before. Over dinner, Jill and I tried to come to an agreement about what to do. I wanted to go home. There wasn't any reason why we needed to keep putting up with the weird water and the yard work when we could go home, be comfortable, hire people to take care of it all. Jill wanted to stay. She'd been looking forward to this trip for months. The chapped skin on her mouth was feeling much better. The cabin had belonged to her parents. She'd spent many summers here. No matter how unpleasant the circumstances might have gotten for us, they were still less stressful than all the work she had waiting for her when we were scheduled to return in 2 months. caved. Yesterday morning, we woke up to a remarkably pleasant surprise. You see, in the parts of the yard where we hadn't carted away the meteorites, the burned parts had disappeared. When I went outside to look, I saw the burns were covered in the same viscous stuff that would occasionally come from our pipes. Underneath the ooze was healthy green grass, and when I looked closer, I saw ants. Ants almost too small to see, where they were crawling up and down the blades, carrying away dried pieces of the slime to bring back to their homes. I headed back inside and told Jill. She acted happy to hear it, but I could tell that she had become deeply uncomfortable. A chapped skin around her mouth and nose had gotten bad again. I offered to take her to the clinic in town, but she didn't want to sit in the car for 4 hours just to have the doctor give her the same cream she'd used on herself for the last week. While she spoke, the left corner of her mouth cracked open and spilled a thin rivet of blood down her chin. Sighing with exasperation, she grabbed a paper towel, turned on the sink to wet it, and put the paper against the wound. When she sat back down, I saw the faucet was drooling the same sticky algae slime that had caused her problem in the first place. But it was too late. She'd already pressed it to the crack in her skin. Before I could mention this to her, Jill's eyes had brightened. She pulled the paper towel away, a string of syrup fluid still connecting the towel to her face. The cut was gone. "Don't," I told her. Jill didn't listen. She went back to the sink and turned it on. Sticky, clear stuff flowed. She filled her hands and brought the content to her face. She rubbed for a moment, then turned back towards me. Behind the sheen around her mouth and nose was new, healthy skin. "That's pretty cool," Jill exclaimed, and wiped the residue away. I didn't know what to think, let alone say it. I figured some homeopathic doctor who minored in algae studies would find it completely normal. We went back to bed and slept, and in the morning, Jill's mouth and nose, while much better than they had been at their worst, were still not as perfect as they were right after she'd applied the slime. I told her I was going to go out in the yard and do some more work. Before I could get out of bed, though, she kissed me. And now we're in our late 50s. We're affectionate with one another, don't get me wrong, but most of the time we just cuddle on the couch and share a pizza. It's easier that way. Requires fewer blue pills, too. That's not to say that we don't have a sex life, because we do, but it's more of a once every 2 months kind of thing. Jill's rapturous kiss was less like one from the woman whom I'd been married to for 35 years, and more like that of the teenager she was when we first started dating. I didn't bother concerning myself with a particular difference, though. I followed her lead, and we did what apparently needed to be done. No blue pills required, thank you very much. Afterward, while I got dressed, I told Jill I was going to start raking up the meteorites that we left the other day. She didn't pay attention. She wanted me back in bed. I laughed and reminded her that even when we were kids, I still had that refractory period of climate cycle. She nodded and told me to be safe outside, and made an obvious show of slipping her hands under the blankets. She looked amazing. To my surprise, I felt renewed stirring below my belt, and before I could say screw it and jump back into bed, I shook my head. I really needed to get going into the yard work. It was just starting to cloud up, and I didn't want to put it off because of rain. I told Jill to have fun, and I went outside. In the untouched area of the yard, the grass was ankle-high. All the burns were gone. Clumps of slime still sat in the grass. The ants that had been going crazy for the stuff were nowhere to be found. I raked and raked and raked. The pebbles piled up, and I shoveled them into the wheelbarrow and brought them to the main pile by a compost heap. I was a little surprised there was no ants at all. I could see their anthills bored into the ground all over the place, but not a single one was out and about. I've been working for about 2 hours non-stop, so during a break, while I chugged from a bottle of water, I bent down to get a closer look. The spots the ants had swarmed the other day. Something was there, but one that I hadn't noticed while I was raking. Something definitely not there when I looked the previous day. There were infinitesimal white dots coating the same blades of grass that had been crawling with ants less than 24 hours ago. I plucked a few blades from the ground and held them in front of my face, hoping to get a better view. The dots were slightly ovoid in shape. Something clicked. Eggs. Ants must have had such a massive meal of that slime stuff that it drove them to reproduce like crazy, or something. I have no idea how they make ants. I heard raindrops impact the trees on the other side of the property. 10 seconds later, they reached me. A distant bolt of lightning streaked the sky, and thunder boomed a moment later. Sighing, I put the rake and shovel on the wheelbarrow, and I wheeled it back to the shed. More lightning and thunder. I figured I wouldn't be getting anything else done around the yard until the storm passed. I headed back into the cabin, banging my boots against the doorway to get the mud off. I stepped inside. "Charlie!" Joe called. I heard water running in the bathroom. From the kitchen where I stood, spooning last night's fruit salad into my bowl, I called back, "What's up?" "Come take a bath with me." I laughed to myself. That bathtub could barely fit 110-pound Jill, let alone 250-pound me. I brought my bowl of fruit salad down with me into the hall and to the bedroom. Before I turned the corner to the bathroom, the water was turned off and Jill shouted out again, "Charlie, are you coming?" Her voice sounded a little different, crisper somehow. I stepped into the candlelit bathroom. Jill was in the tub, leaning back against its curved shape. She was resting her head on a folding towel. She glanced over at me and smiled. Her hands roamed up and down her body. Even in the dim light, she looked incredible. I didn't know whether it was the prospect of repeating our fun from that morning or just the sight of her touching herself, but it was remarkably enjoyable. I placed my bowl in the sink and started to undress. A nearby bolt of lightning immediately followed by an explosion of thunder made me jump. As my surprise faded and I continued to take off my clothes, I realized I'd seen something different in the harsh illumination of the lightning. On the other side of the bathroom, Jill continued her teasing. "Come here and touch me," she whispered. Again, I noticed the unusual quality of her voice. Another clap of thunder shook the house, and at that time the associated burst of lightning showed me exactly what I had trouble identifying at the first strike. With a gasp, I turned on the light. In the harsh overhead fluorescence, everything was revealed. The tub in which Jill was bathing in filled to the brim with clear slime. As I watched, she slid beneath the surface, coating her face and head, and came back up again. When she breached the surface, she spoke. "Please, Charlie, I can't even tell you how good this feels." Again, the different vocal quality. Now, though, in the harsh light, I saw another change. Her hair. Jill's hair had been gray since her late 40s. It was now a light brown. Jill manipulated herself with her right hand and reached for me with her left, clear fluid oozing from her hand and arm and puddled onto the floor like heavy syrup. "Come feel this with me, Charlie." I didn't move. Part of me wanted to pull her from the tub, but another part, as the rain pounded against the roof and the thunder rattled the window panes, was too frightened to touch her. I moved closer but stayed out of reach. Staying at the foot of the tub, I stared at my wife. She bucked her hips against her hand and mouthed my name over and over, rubbing in the slime, causing it to slosh against the sides of the tub. "Jill, please get out. Please." My voice trembled and was barely audible over the pouring rain. She reached for me with both hands and smiled and then spoke. "Don't you want to be young with me again? To start fresh? Don't you remember how good it felt?" Jill slid down. I thought she was going to dip under the slime again, but she stopped at her mouth. She opened it and let the slime pool inside. She closed her lips, and I saw her throat work as she swallowed the mouthful. "It feels so right. So perfect. I want to share this with you, sweetheart." My mind reeled. I thought about every ache and pain I'd accumulated over my 56 years. Every pockmark, every hemorrhoid, the scaly patch that come along over those long decades throbbed as if wanting to be noticed. Before me was a way to make it stop. I remembered how Jill and I were teenagers, full of life and energy and libido. All things that over the years had just started to evaporate. I stared at my wife, who looked exactly like she had when she was 25. Despite my fear, a pang of desire shot through me. Desire and arousal. I wanted Jill. I wanted to be with her in every way imaginable. We could grow old together again. Never grow old at all. Our happiness could last forever if we wanted. All I had to do was join her in the tub. I took a step forward and resumed taking off my clothes. Jill purred and lapped up more of the slimes. Some she swallowed, some she drooled from the corners of her mouth. She absent-mindedly played with herself while she watched me, apparently delighted I was going to join her in this new, impossible youth. As I struggled to bend over and take off my socks, something that had been a pain in my ass since I passed the 225 mark on the scale, I noticed something that caused me to stop. Jill was shrinking. Before my eyes, her hips slimmed. Her feet no longer came to the edge of the tub, but instead barely touched it. "Come bathe with me, honey." Jill's voice was high and childlike. I recoiled. Whatever was happening to her was going faster. She looked to almost be 4 or 5. "It's incredible," she chirped, again reaching for me with one hand. I turned away, nauseated. "Charlie," came the tiny voice behind me. I didn't turn around. "Sweetheart?" The last word was practically babbled, but still carried with an element of inquisitiveness, and no matter how hard I tried to tell myself otherwise. Dejection. She didn't speak again. A moment later, I turned around. Floating in the tub was a red shape approximately the size of a lemon. Tears filled my eyes as it shrank to the size of a cherry, and a pea, and a grain of rice. And I blinked. It was gone. A ribbon of white fluid hung motionless in the slime. "I'm so sorry, my love," I whispered to it. Distant thunder rolled across the forest. Hey there kids, it's me, MrCreepyPasta. Just wanted to say thanks so much for listening. You guys are what makes this channel worthwhile. There'll be new horror stories every Tuesday, Thursday, and Saturday night, as well as gaming live streams every Friday and Sunday night. Please help support on patreon.com/MrCreepyPasta, and you can hear me as well as many other creepypasta narrators live 24/7 at SCRM Radio.com. Sweet dreams.